The Harvest of Blackwood Creek. Clara was a journalist who specialized in forgotten places. She chased Rust Belt towns and withered farm communities, drawn by the quiet dignity of decay. But Blackwood Creek was different. It wasn't just decaying. It felt like it was actively trying to forget itself. She had arrived 2 weeks before the Midsummer Bonfire, the town's only real claim to tourism, and found a silence so thick it seemed to absorb light. The houses were neat, almost unnaturally so, but the windows were all dark, like blind eyes. Main Street was a short, brutal stretch of tarmac dominated by the hulking, defunct mill, the town's former heart, now a monument to its failure. She had learned the basics. The disappearances were tithes, offerings demanded by the encircling, sentient forest known as the Cradle. They took the town's most vital resource, human potential, to ensure its survival. She, the inquisitive journalist, had been marked as the eye, destined for the flames within 3 days. The realization struck her like a physical blow. She stood frozen in the dusty attic room above the old mill office, the small, handwritten name tag lying on the floor. It read, Clara, Tithe, the Eye. The silk paper it was written on was cold, but the ink was unnervingly warm to the touch. It wasn't a threat, it was an invitation to a slaughter. A primal fear, raw and sickening, seized her. She snatched up Elias Blackwood's journal, shoved it into her backpack, and began frantically throwing her meager belongings into her duffel bag. The town might be bound by a 19th-century ritual, but she had a rental car and the open road. All she had to do was drive. She crept down the narrow wooden stairs of the mill office. The air was colder here, smelling of wet concrete and stagnant river water. The mill had been built directly over Blackwood Creek, the town's namesake, a shallow, black ribbon of water that flowed out of the dense forest and disappeared under the town square. Her footsteps echoed in the silent office below, a sound that felt deafening in the town's oppressive quiet. She reached the door, unlatched the heavy deadbolt, and stepped out onto the damp street. Her rented Ford Focus was parked exactly where she had left it, across the street. She reached into her jeans pocket for the key. Empty. Panic clawed at her throat. She patted her other pockets, tearing her duffel bag open, frantically scattering clothes. The key wasn't there. She scrambled back up to the room, checking under the bed, flipping the thin mattress, and pulling apart the piles of newspapers. Nothing. She knew she hadn't lost it. She was meticulously organized, a habit honed by years of chasing stories alone. It had been taken. She looked out the window toward the square. The colossal, 30-foot Wicker Man seemed to watch her, its wooden grin wider and crueler than before, bathed in the harsh yellow of a lone streetlight. The shadow it cast still resembled an enormous, sinking tree root. With her last physical avenue of escape cut off, Clara retreated to the only weapon she had, Elias Blackwood's journal. She spent the remaining hours until dawn poring over the brittle pages. Blackwood was not a madman. He was a pragmatist consumed by desperation. His settlement was failing in the late 1880s, facing disease and crop failure. The forest surrounding them, the Cradle, was not just wood, it was an ecosystem with a consciousness, dormant until threatened. Blackwood discovered an ancient, pre-colonial binding ritual. The town would survive in perpetual stasis, never growing, never truly dying, but always remaining strong, as long as it paid a periodic tithe of potential. The journal described the central binding point. The heart of the promise is placed where the water meets the stone. The millstone, which ground our sustenance, must be the altar. The creek, which sustains our ground, must be the artery. The cradle extends its reach through the foundation, and the tithe is paid in the fire, where the strength is released into the ground. The millstone, the foundation of the defunct mill where she was currently staying. The ritual wasn't meant to simply kill a person. It was meant to extract their unique, unactualized potential. Clara's sight, Jared Finch's knowledge, someone else's art, and infuse it into the soil, maintaining the town's static, unnatural vitality. A sharp knock on the door downstairs shattered the silence. Miss Hayes. Clara Hayes. It's Sheriff Dale. I just need a quick word. Clara froze. Sheriff Dale was a man she'd seen only twice. A wide, silent man with a neat mustache and eyes that never quite met hers. He was Blackwood Creek's one connection to the outside world, yet he seemed as much a fixture as the Wicker Man. She slowly descended the stairs, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sheriff stood in the doorway, blocking the streetlights. He held her car keys loosely in his hand. Looking for these, ma'am? Clara felt a cold wave of resignation. Where did you find them, Sheriff? They were on the counter at Elias & Son, he said, his voice flat and even. Martha said you must have been distracted. She told me you were asking questions about old Jared Finch. I was, Clara admitted. I'm worried about him. Sheriff Dale stepped inside, pushing the door shut with his heel. He didn't look menacing, just impossibly heavy, like a column of stone. No need to worry, Miss Hayes. Jared went where all our young folks go. To the city. To find opportunity. He held the keys out, but didn't release them when Clara reached. Their hands brushed. His skin was unnervingly dry and cool. Blackwood Creek is not a place for opportunity, Miss Hayes. It is a place for stasis, he murmured, his gaze finally locking onto hers. There was no hostility in his eyes, only a deep, ancient boredom. We survive because we do not change. We do not question. We do not look too closely. You, being a journalist, you are designed to do all those things. He twisted the keys away. I think you've been here too long, Miss Hayes. Your deadline must be approaching. I suggest you drive out first thing tomorrow morning. I'll leave these on the bench across the street. A good night's rest, and a quick departure. The threat was clear, polite, and absolute. The town knew. The law was complicit. And if I don't leave? Clara challenged, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. Sheriff Dale gave a small, sad smile. Then you stay. And everyone here will be very, very quiet. Quiet is fine, Miss Hayes. Nothing bad ever happens in quiet. He dropped the keys onto the dusty wooden bench outside, gave a slight, formal nod, and walked away into the oppressive darkness. The keys were waiting for her at dawn. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the keys, her backpack, and sprinted for the car. The street was empty, and the silence was back, not just quiet, but a vacuum of sound. She started the engine, threw the shifter into drive, and sped down Main Street, past the general store, past the last stop, and toward the main road out of Blackwood Creek. The Midsummer Bonfire was less than 48 hours away. She hit the town limits sign, a rusted metal sheet listing the population as 412, and accelerated onto the Forest Highway, a narrow, winding road flanked on both sides by the Cradle. The trees here were different. They weren't leafy and soft. They were old, gnarled pines that leaned inward over the road, their branches thick and dark, woven together like a net over the sky. She drove for 5 minutes, pushing 80 miles an hour. The forest was a relentless wall of green and shadow. The sun, which had been bright in the town square, barely penetrated the canopy here. The road curved and dropped into a sharp ravine, and Clara was momentarily blinded by the gloom. When she emerged from the dip, she felt a profound sense of wrongness. Something felt familiar. Too familiar. She looked ahead. A white, abandoned pickup truck sat on the shoulder. She remembered seeing it parked behind the sheriff's office yesterday. Then she saw the sign. Rusted metal. Population 412. She had driven back into Blackwood Creek. Clara slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop right next to the town limits sign she had just passed minutes earlier. She looked at her phone. GPS signal, strong. Time elapsed. Exactly 6 minutes. Distance traveled. 0. She tried again, taking a different route, a smaller county road that supposedly circled the forest to the north. She drove for nearly 10 minutes this time, maintaining a steady speed, refusing to look at the oppressive trees. She was careful, noting landmarks, a strangely bent guardrail, a distinctive patch of moss on an outcropping. When the road finally twisted into a sharp, familiar S-curve, she saw the mossy rock outcropping, and beyond it, the sign, "Welcome to Blackwood Creek, population 412. The forest was not a barrier, it was a Mobius strip. The cradle didn't just surround the town, it interwove with it, folding space back upon itself. The binding was not just a legal document, it was a literal, geographical curse. Clara parked the car back in its spot, defeated. The keys felt heavy and meaningless in her hand. She was trapped in the same way Jared Finch and the 5 others were trapped before their final tithe. Silas found her later that afternoon, sitting on the steps of the mill, staring blankly at the Wicker Man. "They returned your keys," he said, without question. "They let me drive out. And then drove me back in," Clara replied, her voice raw. "The town won't let anyone with strength leave. It needs to hold onto its harvest." Silas sat down heavily next to her. "They keep the path clear for the meek. For the tired. For those who possess nothing the town desires. But you possess too much. Your escape attempt. It just proved to them that your I is vital." Clara pulled Blackwood's journal from her backpack, her hands slick with sweat. "The journal says the land asks its fee. But there has to be a way to break the promise." Blackwood wrote about the binding ritual in detail. "If there's a binding, there has to be an unbinding." Silas took the journal and turned its brittle pages to the very first section. "You focused on the curse. Focus on the beginning. Blackwood didn't just bind the town. He tried to protect his own family," Silas whispered, tracing a line of faded script. "He made 7 promises. 6 were to the cradle. The 7th was to his bloodline." He pointed to a small, hand-drawn map. It was a crude sketch of the mill, the creek, and the town square, but there was an overlaid symbol, a series of interlocking rings radiating from the millstone, the center. "The 6 roots hold the foundation. The 7th root, the root of reversal, is the only thread left to the light. It holds the seed, and the seed alone can reverse the hunger. The 6 roots are the 6 tithes that maintain the bond every cycle," Clara realized, her heart thumping. "But the 7th root, what is it? A person? A place?" Silas pointed to a small, darkened area on the map, far to the west of town, past the graveyard. It was marked only with a single, looping symbol that looked like an infinity sign carved into a stylized tree. "The first settlers, Blackwood's family, they established a house deep in the cradle after the binding," Silas explained. "He couldn't break the promise, so he tried to build a sanctuary outside of it. A place the forest couldn't touch. The seed," Clara murmured, looking at the infinity symbol. "It's the key. If I can find the seed, maybe I can find the unbinding ritual." "You can't go into the cradle," Silas warned, gripping her arm. "The forest knows you're marked. It will simply return you to the town square, or worse, it will consume you immediately and leave you tangled in its roots for the town to find later." Clara looked at the Wicker Man. "Only one night remained before the Midsummer Bonfire. I have to go through it. she said, standing up. The town is too quiet for me to escape on the roads. The only way out is through the forest, and the only path I have is the one Blackwood cut himself. I need a distraction. What kind of distraction? Silas asked, his face pale with dread. Clara thought of Martha, the shopkeeper, and Sheriff Dale, the ones who managed the town's quiet decay. She thought of the fresh notice for Jared Finch beneath the 5 yellowed ones. The town was not just complicit, it was actively harvesting its own. I need to make the town stop being quiet, Clara stated. I need to make them look away from me for just long enough to slip into the woods and find Blackwood's route of reversal. The millstone is the heart of the binding. I'll start there. She looked down at the creek running under the mill. The black water flowed fast, cold, and silent. That evening, the forced merriment had reached a fever pitch. Townspeople gathered near the square, carrying lanterns and singing old, discordant hymns. The air, thick with the smell of pine and something sickly sweet like overripe apples, pressed down on Clara. She slipped back into the defunct mill office, carrying a heavy iron lever she'd found rusting in the corner. She followed Blackwood's map down into the sub-basement, a space Blackwood had named the Undercroft. It was a stone-lined, earth-floored chamber where the rushing creek water was channeled through a series of narrow troughs before disappearing beneath the town. In the center of the Undercroft stood the original millstone, a massive, circular slab of granite, dark with age and perpetually damp. The stone was sunk into the earth, and around its base, 6 thick, twisted iron bands, like immense roots, sank into the granite, connecting the stone to the foundation walls. These were the 6 roots of the binding. Clara raised the iron lever, its shadow grotesque in the low, flickering light of her headlamp. She targeted the weakest point, the junction where the central iron band met the granite of the millstone. She swung the lever down with all her strength. The sound was not the expected metallic crack. It was a scream. A deep, resonating shriek that didn't come from the iron or the stone, but from the very ground itself. The entire mill shook violently. Dust and fine earth rained down from the ceiling. Outside, the forced singing abruptly stopped. The oppressive silence returned, but this time, it was expectant, hostile, and utterly focused on the mill. Clara hadn't broken the root. She had merely alerted the cradle. Before she could swing again, a shadow moved in the archway of the Undercroft. It was Martha, the shopkeeper, standing perfectly still, holding an oil lantern. Her pale, river-stone eyes were wide, and a cruel, exhilarated smile stretched her lips. "The eye sees the root, and the root cries out," Martha whispered, her voice a dry rasp. "You shouldn't have done that, dear. We were ready to simply accept the tithe with grace, but now you've interfered." The iron lever was instantly ripped from Clara's grip. Not by Martha, but by a sudden, incredibly strong current of air that whistled up from the millstone, throwing the lever clattering across the floor. The iron bands holding the millstone began to glow a dull, sickening red. The granite hummed. "You think you can break the promise?" Martha chuckled, stepping closer. "The promise is the town. It keeps our children safe from the outside world and our gardens green. It keeps the quiet. And now, you've made it angry." Clara backed away toward a narrow access tunnel that led into the deepest part of the foundation. "Jared Finch tried to save the woods. You took his knowledge. Why do you need sight? Why do you need my ability to write?" Martha's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too long. "Because the cradle is growing, dear. And if people outside knew what we do, they would come. They would interfere. They would break the quiet. We need your silence. We need your strength to ensure that what you saw dies with the fire." As she spoke, the earth around the millstone began to ripple, not like water, but like muscle under skin. From the ground, roots, thick, black, and dripping with creek water, began to snake up, wrapping around the iron bands and growing toward Clara. Clara turned and scrambled into the access tunnel. She heard Martha's voice echoing behind her, calm and triumphant. "You're headed into the belly of the millstone, dear. Right where the tithe is collected. You can't hide from the cradle." The tunnel was narrow and dark, its walls slick with cold moisture. She followed Blackwood's map in her mind. The route of reversal, the escape path, must start beyond the millstone's shadow. She was deep under the center of the town. She crawled for what felt like an eternity, the screams of the disturbed earth still ringing in her ears, until the tunnel opened into a small, dry, earthen cavity. She was under the square itself. She looked up, and through a small, crumbling vent, she could see the sky. And the base of the colossal Wicker Man, resting directly above her. She could feel the enormous weight of the wooden effigy pressing down, ready for its fiery purpose. But beneath the Wicker Man, in the earthen floor of the cavity, Clara saw a small, brass plaque set into the stone. It was tarnished and nearly invisible, carved with the looping infinity symbol, the root of reversal. She was standing on the seed. She knelt and furiously scraped away the accumulated dirt and grit. The plaque read, "To sever the bond of the six, the seed must be planted in the seventh. Only in the house of Blackwood, beyond the furthest reach of the creek's shadow, shall the potential be returned." Clara realized the truth. The town wasn't trapping her to kill her. It was trapping her to burn her at the central binding point, permanently sealing its silence. The escape was not through the roads, but through the one place the town had abandoned, the first Blackwood homestead deep inside the cradle. She stood up, drawing a deep breath of the stale, earthy air. She had no keys, no car, and the entire town was looking for her. But she had a map, a journal, and the knowledge of the route of reversal. The only way out of Blackwood Creek was to walk straight into the hungry, sentient woods that had marked her for death. The bonfire was less than 24 hours away, and the town was now truly, dangerously quiet. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment and turn on notifications if you enjoyed the video so you never miss an upload.